My parents leave my siblings with me to be free and date other people. But after 10 years, they make the mistake of suing me to get them back when they owe me child support. When I was 21, my life changed completely in ways I never imagined. I just finished my associate degree and was working part-time while figuring out my next steps. I didn't have big dreams, just wanted stability, maybe study part-time and save up. Then, I got a call from my parents that turned everything upside down in an instant. Let me start by saying I always thought of them as unconventional but decent people. They weren't warm or affectionate, but they were my parents and I trusted them to be responsible with their kids. That trust shattered during that call. They told me they were moving to another state not for work or family reasons, but to start over. They wanted to find themselves or whatever midlife crisis phrase they were using. The worst part, they had no plans to take my younger siblings with them. I have 3 siblings, Jacob, 10 at the time, a sweet but sensitive kid who admired our parents more than anyone else. Then the twins, Joe and Ethan, only 6 years old. My parents wanted to live their lives without attachments, so they decided I should take responsibility. In their minds, the logical solution was for me to take care of my siblings since I was already an adult. According to them, I could be a good sister and look after them. At first, I honestly thought it was a bad joke. I remember nervously laughing, waiting for them to say, "Just kidding," but that never happened. Within weeks, they packed up and left, leaving me temporary guardianship papers and a small savings account for the kids. Then, they disappeared, no plans to visit, no promises to stay in touch, nothing. I was overwhelmed and terrified. I knew nothing about raising kids, let alone 3 of them. I tried fighting it. I called social services, hoping they'd intervene. I explained that I could barely support myself and didn't have the resources. I thought they'd understand, but when they learned I was family and willing to try, their tone changed. They explained that the system prioritizes keeping children with family whenever possible. They offered some resources, checked that my apartment was safe for kids, and left it at that. If the kids went into foster care, I didn't want that for them. We had no other close family who could or would take them in. I was trapped. To be honest, those first years were hell. I went from barely taking care of myself to being a full-time mom to 3 kids. I worked multiple jobs, barely slept, and constantly felt like nothing I did was enough. The nights were the hardest. I stayed up worrying about money. Jacob acted out at first. He was angry at the world and at me, though he knew it wasn't really my fault. The twins were just confused. The savings my parents left didn't last long. It was gone in under a year. By then, I'd learned just how expensive it is to raise 3 kids. I remember one particularly bad week. My car broke down, leaving me scrambling to get the kids to school and myself to work. The fridge was almost empty and I had no idea how I'd pay for food. Desperate, I pawned some items I'd sworn I'd never part with just to get through the week. To make ends meet, I started taking any extra work I could find, cleaning houses, babysitting, running errands for neighbors. I did anything that brought in extra money, so long as it was something I could do while watching the kids, like babysitting or during hours when they were at school. At one point, I was juggling 3 jobs on top of raising the kids. I barely slept, maybe 4 hours a night, if I was lucky. My days were an endless loop of work, errands, cooking, cleaning, and parenting. At times, I felt like I was drowning, but somehow, I kept going. Slowly, we found a rhythm. The kids started adapting to our new normal. Jacob settled down. By the time he got to high school, he excelled academically and even joined the soccer team. The twins, Joe and Ethan, became happy, imaginative kids. Joe loved drawing and insisted she'd be an artist one day, while Ethan alternated between wanting to be a firefighter, scientist, or superhero, depending on the day. Even when I was completely exhausted, their energy and imagination were contagious. As we found stability, I tried to give them as normal a childhood as possible. I went to Jacob's soccer games, cheered loudly at the twins' school plays, and stayed up late helping with homework. Birthdays were always a big deal, even when money was tight. I got creative with homemade cakes, secondhand toys, or fun trips to the park. It wasn't easy. I had to grow up faster than anyone should, but somehow so did the kids. We became a team, supporting each other through tough times. They gave me strength on days I thought I couldn't go on, and I like to think I gave them stability in a world that had turned upside down. At the same time, I carried so much anger. I loved my siblings with all my heart, but I couldn't ignore the deep resentment I felt toward my parents. They dumped their responsibilities onto me, their own daughter, without a second thought. I paid the price for their selfishness in ways they could never understand. My 20s disappeared. College, once a realistic goal, became an impossible dream. Friendships faded because I didn't have time for anyone. While my peers partied, traveled, and built careers, I was figuring out how to stretch $1 to cover lunch money and electricity bills. By the time Jacob was in college and the twins were finishing high school, I was exhausted but proud we'd made it. The kids were growing into good people despite everything, and I was beginning to imagine what my life might look like once they became fully independent. I even started considering going back to school or taking a trip somewhere. I felt like I could finally breathe again. Then, out of nowhere, my parents reappeared after abandoning us for roughly 10 years as if nothing had changed. Apparently, they'd found new partners during that time but decided to remarry each other. Yes, you read that right. After all this time, their big self-discovery journey brought them back together. When they first showed up, I thought maybe they wanted to make amends, but I couldn't have been more wrong. They didn't want to apologize or fix anything. They wanted to reclaim their family as if picking up where they left off was possible. To them, family wasn't about closeness or repair, it was about projecting a picture-perfect image of a happy, normal family. When I didn't welcome them back, things turned ugly fast. Then, 2 days ago, I got an unexpected blow. They sued me. Yes, seriously, they're suing me for legal custody of the kids. The twins are 16 now, so Jacob, being 20, isn't included. They filed a lawsuit claiming I took custody improperly and that they want their parental rights restored because they're remarrying. They claim they're reuniting the family as if I haven't spent the last 10 years holding it together by myself. I'm furious. I gave up my dreams, my freedom, and so much more to care for the kids they abandoned. Now they want to waltz back into our lives as if nothing happened, erasing the fact that I raised 3 kids alone at 21. I can't understand how they think they have any legal grounds, but apparently they hired a lawyer to spin the narrative that I kidnapped the kids. They claim they never intended to give up their parental rights permanently. They say they were just taking a break when they left the kids. The twins want nothing to do with them. Jacob is vocal about how much he resents them for what they did, and the twins remember enough to know they were abandoned. But the lawsuit is real and I'm terrified. I don't have money for a prolonged legal battle. My siblings are on my side, but this isn't just about what's right, it's about what I can afford to fight. I'm writing this because it feels like too much. The idea that the people who abandoned us could come back and disrupt our lives after everything we've been through is infuriating. I don't even know where to start or how to handle this. How do you protect the family you built from the people trying to tear it apart? What should I do? Update 1. It's been a couple of days since I shared what's happening. What surprises me most is how kind strangers have been, wishing my siblings and me the best, unlike my parents, who share our blood but abandoned us for selfish reasons. I'll answer one thing briefly now, which will be important later: child support. I never sued my parents for it because I didn't have the money or time. I was busy with 3 kids who had so many needs. I didn't even know I could sue for child support until years later, and by then, I still couldn't afford a lawyer. But maybe that will change now. Many have suggested I hire a lawyer immediately, even if it means taking out loans or starting a fundraiser. I've begun looking for family law attorneys who specialize in cases like this and contacting legal aid organizations to see if they can help. This won't be cheap, but I have no choice. Jacob and the twins are furious about the lawsuit. They've all said they'll speak to a lawyer or testify if needed. Knowing they're on my side means everything. Jacob is especially angry. He hasn't said much directly, but I can see how much this is affecting him. The twins are handling it differently. Jo has been very quiet, which isn't like her, while Ethan is throwing himself into his studies. I think they're coping in their own ways, but it's clear this is taking a toll. I've started gathering every piece of evidence I can find. It feels endless, but I have to do it. I've gone through old emails, text messages from my parents, school records for the kids, medical bills, and receipts for everything I've paid over the years. I'm putting it all into a timeline from when they left until now. It's exhausting, but I hope it helps in the long run. I'm also documenting everything they've done recently. What hurts the most is how some distant relatives have reached out, telling me I should just make things right with my parents. These are the same people I called when my parents abandoned my siblings, and they didn't lift a finger to help. One relative even had the audacity to say that the kids who've spent nearly their entire childhood with me might have a better life if I let my parents take over. As if they hadn't abandoned them in the first place. They don't even want to be around our parents. No wonder they were old enough to remember when our parents left. The first court hearing is in 2 weeks, and the waiting is killing me. I can't stop thinking about it. Every time I imagine facing my parents in court, my stomach turns. My siblings are no longer just my responsibility, they're my family. My parents gave up that role a long time ago. What scares me most is how unpredictable the legal system can be. I have no idea how this will unfold. On top of that, something happened last night that made everything feel even worse. I received a letter from my parents, not a formal court notice, just a handwritten letter. They wrote about how they've forgiven me for destroying the family and want us to heal together. They claimed they've changed and are finally ready to be the parents we always needed. The best part? They said I could stay involved in my siblings' lives if I let go of the past. Jacob saw the letter before I could, and he completely lost it. He tore it into tiny pieces and stormed out of the house, furious. When he came back, he told me he'd never forgive them for what they did to us. I don't blame him at all. I haven't shown the letter to the twins yet. I've taped the pieces back together. Maybe the letter will be useful for the lawyer. To make things worse, a neighbor mentioned seeing a car parked outside our house with someone inside who looked like my dad, based on the photo I showed them. I've been checking the locks every night and considering installing security cameras, though they're expensive. I know this might sound paranoid, but I can't take any risks. I'm trying to keep things as normal as possible for my siblings, even though everything feels far from normal. We've been cooking together, playing board games, anything to distract ourselves. But there's a heavy tension in the air. Every time the phone rings or someone knocks on the door, my heart races. The stress is getting to all of us, and honestly, I don't know how much more we can take. I'm doing everything I can, but it never seems to be enough. I'll keep reading advice and ideas from my last post as well as those you leave here. I appreciate and read every constructive suggestion. Update 2: the big news is that I've officially hired a lawyer. It's a huge relief, and they seem like a good one, unlike my parents' lawyer, who seemed shady at best. Honestly, I couldn't have done it without my boyfriend, who stepped up and helped cover the initial costs. The lawyer reviewed everything and said my parents' claims don't hold much weight. The fact that they abandoned us and I've cared for the kids for nearly a decade works heavily in our favor. The lawyer also said we can countersue not just for back child support but also for additional expenses. While we have a strong case, the legal process is still incredibly stressful. I'd prefer not to go through any of this and for my parents to stay in their new lives without bothering us. Sometimes, I even think if they'd had an accident or something, life would have been simpler for us. Jacob and the twins have been incredible throughout this. Each of them wrote statements about their experiences and how they feel about our parents. Reading what they said left me in tears. They wrote that I've been everything to them: mom, dad, sister, brother, all in one. Knowing they feel this way makes all the sacrifices and effort over the years worth it. Jacob's statement hit me the hardest. He wrote about how he used to wait by the window, hoping our parents would come back, and how he eventually had to accept they never would. As for my parents, they haven't stopped trying to push their way in. I've been getting multiple voicemails from my mom, crying about wanting to be a mother to the twins and Jacob, saying she misses them and doesn't understand why I can't accept them back. They even tried contacting Jacob directly. My parents sent him several messages, though I don't know how they got his number, essentially trying to bribe him. They offered to help with his college expenses, buy him a car, and said they just wanted to reunite the family. Jacob showed me the messages, and it was obvious he was furious. He told me flat out he didn't want anything to do with them. I told him to block their numbers if he needed to, though we've sent the messages to our lawyer in case they're useful. On a positive note, some distant relatives who've been out of touch for years have shown their support. Apparently, my parents' behavior is raising eyebrows everywhere. A distant aunt, not really an aunt, told me she had no idea how bad it was and offered to write a letter on our behalf. She wants to detail how my parents essentially vanished and left me to raise the kids alone. Another cousin of my dad shared a story about how my mom once said she was tired of being a mom and needed to live her own life. Anything that helps is welcome, even if the support is late. The court date is approaching fast, and I'm doing everything I can to prepare. I also started a GoFund to help with legal fees, and the response has been incredible. Strangers have donated and left kind comments, reminding me there are good people in the world, even when there are horrible ones like my parents. I'm holding on to that hope as we move forward. I'm trying to stay strong for the kids, but there are moments when fear and anger overwhelm me. I won't lie, it's hard facing this alone. Update 3: the court hearing was today, and I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. They ruled in our favor. The judge dismissed my parents' lawsuit entirely, stating that their abandonment and lack of involvement over the past 10 years made their claims completely unjustifiable. My lawyer did an excellent job explaining that their sudden desire for custody wasn't about caring for the kids but rather some selfish motive. The judge agreed quickly, calling their behavior over the years a clear pattern of neglect. Honestly, I feel so much lighter after this verdict, which is perfect as we prepare for our countersuit. I'll share more about that later. After the ruling, we were leaving the courthouse when my parents tried to approach us in the hallway. That's when Jacob confronted them and let them have it. He told them how they abandoned us during the hardest years of our lives, dumped all their responsibilities onto my shoulders, and now had the audacity to act like they were the victims. Let them rot, he said. Then, he added something that must have stung even more. He told them that my boyfriend had been more of a father figure to him and the twins than they ever were. They couldn't argue because they knew he was right. They stood there speechless as we walked away. On the way to the car, Jacob told me he'd never felt prouder of himself, and I couldn't agree more. The twins were quiet on the ride home, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of what's to come. I even feel a bit euphoric knowing it's our turn to fight back. The lawyer says we have a strong case for child support, and while this hasn't been cheap, the outcome might be worth it. I'm not convinced my parents care about losing the kids. It's just another bump in their road. But taking a significant amount of money from them? That's the minimum they owe my siblings, and it might actually hurt them. When we got home, we sat down as a family to talk about what we want for the future. For so long, we've just been surviving the chaos of day-to-day life, but now we can finally think about what comes next. Jacob talked about getting more involved in college. He's looking into mentorship programs and even considering applying for leadership roles. The twins are doing much better, focusing on school, something I've always encouraged. Now we're waiting to see what happens with the countersuit and how my parents will react. I don't expect them to take it well. No one likes being sued. Trust me, I would know. But oh, what a surprise they'll get when they realize I can drag them through court too. Edit, apparently my parents have been reading my posts. So, Mom and Dad, if you're reading this, let me tell you from the bottom of my heart, go rot. Update 4. Knowing my parents might be reading this after losing the child support case feels even better. I might seem petty for enjoying this, but everything I've endured over these years makes me proud of how things have turned out. Not only did we win the child support case, but the amount we won is substantial. We're talking about 10 years worth since my first post was months ago, and we've now crossed the 10-year mark. While Jacob turned 18 a while ago and the full 10 years don't apply to him, raising 3 kids for so long adds up. It's a lot of money. How much, you ask? Over $100,000 more money than I've ever seen in my life. I won't get it all at once since my parents will be on a payment plan, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a huge amount. My parents must be thinking about that number right now. If you're reading this, Mom and Dad, read that number again. You deserve this for being terrible parents. What will I do with the money? I'll split it equally and set up education funds for my siblings. I want to give them the opportunities I never had. Jacob, who's already in college and working to pay for it, will now have a big weight lifted off his shoulders. Whether he uses it for tuition or life after graduation, it's his choice. The twins still have some time before they go to college, but I know they'll get there. They've been preparing for it. My siblings suggested giving me a portion of the money, but I told them it's theirs. If they decide to share it with me later, that's their decision, but I've encouraged them to use it for school and avoid student debt. As for me, I'm still in my 30s, so I'm not too old to go back to college myself. With the twins heading off soon, I'll have more free time. Maybe we'll plan a family trip, including my boyfriend, before the twins start college. Those are plans for the future. From the bottom of my heart, I hope my parents feel this loss as the most painful thing in the world. It's the only thing that might hurt them as much as my siblings were hurt when they were abandoned. To everyone who isn't like my parents, I wish you the best. You've shown kindness to strangers like us, helping in any way you could. I love you all, and if you ever have a problem, I'll be here, reading this subreddit and helping however I can.